welcome back to Tavian's World of Reptiles. I hope you all are happy and healthy and taking care of yourselves. So today we are going to be wrapping up this Keeping Snakes in Tubs series. It has been going on for a little bit. It actually went on maybe a little bit longer than I expected it to. But there were many layers that I really wanted to cover, and I felt like if I put them all in one solid video, people wouldn't even make it through like 2 to 3 minutes of it. And I really just wanted people to really be able to hit each one of those layers that I've covered so far. And I think even if people have just watched a few minutes of each of those videos, they have a pretty good idea of what I was trying to say with each one of those topics. So I really hope that you guys have enjoyed this series so far. I've actually had a pretty good time creating it. So what we are going to be discussing is kind of a little bit of two different things to wrap this up. And because the first one is just, I don't really have a lot to say about it, but I definitely want to cover it. And that's about keeping giant snakes in these tubs or rack systems, or in this case, really any of the enclosures that you might have seen most of the big snakes kept in. For the most part, they're not in the size enclosures that people feel like they need to be in. Even the like vivariums or terrariums or whatever you want to call it, the visual enclosures that people have them in are still like not quite as big as people would think that these giants need. I'm talking about Burmese pythons, reticulated python, anacondas, and the such. I try to do, reach out and ask people, who keep these large snakes in these conditions, what their reasons are. I've read through a few different forums on the subject to see where people stand with it. And it kind of is a bit of a repeat of what's already been said, specifically about like ball pythons. And the consensus is that these giant snakes, they just don't need the space that people think that they need. Essentially, what people are saying is that even if you provided them with these huge elaborate enclosures that people think these giants need, that the snakes wouldn't utilize the space, that they would like choose one spot on the hot side and just stay there, and maybe choose a spot on the cooler side and just stay there. They would not utilize all the space that's been offered to them. So there's no point in offering them space that they're not going to utilize, that it really just ends up stressing the snake more than necessary. And this is just a lot of what I've seen repeated and all the stuff that I've seen talked about with people talking about it. So and that's just it. There's really not much more argument on it, and there's no like budging on this. I think people are really just like, these giant snakes have what they need. These enclosures, these racks, these tubs, whatever they're being kept in, are enough for the snake. They have all the humidity requirements, they have their heat requirements, they have the perfect husbandry needs for these snakes. So they don't really need all this other stuff that people feel these giant snakes need, especially because they're so large. They don't tend to be as active as people seem to think that they are. Now, of course, there are going to be people who feel like that's just they don't feel like that's enough. That's just not fair. That's still not enough. Like, the snake can't get enrichment or exercise. How does the snake have a happy life with just sitting in one space at all times? Like, this can't be right. And this actually leads me into the last thing that I really want to talk to you guys about, because it's a super important thing to really remember. And I actually want to give a big shout out to Blackballed, who actually responded on a previous video of one of the previous videos in this series and shared his outlook on this. And one of the things that he said really stood out for me. And I was like, yes, that right there, we definitely need to bring that to the surface, because people really need to remember that. And he pretty much was just like, what you guys see, what you see, right? You see what I allow you to see. We see what these breeders allow us to see, and these private keepers allow us to see. They show us their pictures or their videos of them opening their snake drawers or the racks, and whatever, and maintaining them or feeding them or whatever it is they're doing, and that's what we see. And we think that is it. That's the life that snake has, and that's the end of it. But what he said was that you don't see the time that I spend with my snakes aside from the videos that I produce. And it is true. A lot of people who come on YouTube looking at videos, or who are on any of the social media platforms seeing videos or pictures or whatever the case may be, they're only seeing what they're seeing. But what you don't see is all the time that those breeders or those private keepers are spending with those snakes off camera. So what you're seeing is them opening these drawers to show you this, and then maybe closing the drawers, and that's it. But those keepers actually do take time to take those snakes out of those tubs, drawers, or smaller enclosures, and allow them space to roam, and allow them to stretch out and give them the exercise and the enrichment that they need. And we don't always see this. So that's a thing that is super important to keep in mind when we are seeing these pictures and these videos, because we are only seeing what we see. So these snakes, these giant snakes even, might be kept in these drawers, and you may feel like that's just not enough. Like, even though they do have, everything they need, they do have their humidity requirements, their husbandry is perfect, it's just not enough enrichment. They don't get time to exercise, and that's just because we're not seeing that as much. What you're not seeing is what you're not seeing. And so that's something to really, really, really keep in the forefront of your thoughts, because this is a hobby that has a lot of gray areas, a lot of unseen, a lot of unknown. Reptiles in general, there's so much we have to learn about them, about keeping them, about them in the wild, and so much more. So when you're watching these things, you have to know that you yourself need to take time to learn and observe and figure out what it is you're seeing. Is this the regular conditions that the snakes are kept in? Is it a temporary condition? What happens to the snakes when they're not on camera? So, I hope that that is just something that you guys keep in your thoughts when you are, making judgments on this topic, or anything that you are seeing about the way that people are keeping snakes, whether that be in a enclosure, whether that be in tubs, whether that be in a rack system. There are so many factors to consider. As I have said over and over and over again throughout this series, this is just too complex of a subject to really just pass judgment on first glance. You don't know the situations that people are in. You don't know why they're keeping these things. And most importantly, you don't see everything. So those snakes that you are seeing in those rack systems, they get time out. You're just maybe not seeing it as often as you might like. This does not mean the snakes do not have proper enrichment in their life, that they don't actually get time to come out and stretch and exercise, and be with us as their keepers, because that does happen. So, but yes, if you guys have enjoyed this series, please hit that thumbs up on all the videos. If you are new to this series and you have no idea what I'm talking about, please check out my videos. Go back, watch this series, let me know what you think. If there are things that you feel like I missed, I will happily touch on those in a future video. It'll be a whole different thing. I'll just post a video about it, because this series has definitely come down to an end. I don't know much more that I can bring to you guys on all the different things that are involved with keeping snakes in tubs. And so I don't want to just keep dragging it out, finding every little tiny detail to go over, because there are so many, and it all just depends on which situation that you're talking about. And like I said, everybody does things differently, so you just got to figure out what works best for you if you are a keeper. And if you are not a keeper, you're just somebody on the outside looking in, you really just got to consider all these things that have been talked about over these series, and really make your judgments based on that, and not just on first appearances and the first things that you're seeing. So that's it, everybody. This is TWR. You guys take care. Love yourselves. Love your reptiles. Love your loved ones. And you keep spreading those herbs.